Welcome to the Hsu-Tang Library Podcast. Made possible by a generous gift from Agnes Hsu-Tang and Oscar Tang, the Hsu-Tang Library of Classical Chinese Literature is a major new series publishing bilingual editions of Chinese literature from the Zhou dynasty to the end of the imperial era in 1911. In this episode, we hear from the translator Elizabeth Smithrosser, who discusses the misadventures of Master Mugwort, the challenges of translating comedy from one language into another, and what is most unique about the brand of satire that is employed in the books collected in her translation.
Master Mugwort himself is a fictional character. We think he came into being around the turn of the 12th century, but the stories about him in the volume are not set in that time, and instead happened much earlier in the classical era. So that's before China was unified in 221 BCE by the first emperor. If you've heard of the Terracotta Army, and that's his tomb, we're looking at a land of multiple kingdoms, now in a period called the Warring States period. Later on, during the 1500s and the 1600s, the popularity of this Master Mugwort character went on to inspire two sequels, and they're called Further Sayings of Master Mugwort and Outer Sayings of Master Mugwort. All three of these, the original collection plus the two sequel collections, are translated in this volume. And that gives us a total of 76 episodes, each revolving around the antics of the Master Mugwort protagonist. And as readers, we follow him around as he wanders from state to state in this reimagined classical age, almost like we're one of his disciples, really. On the way, he meets and interacts with famous kings and other figures from history, as well as more generic stock characters from traditional Chinese society and literature. So you've got merchants, marriage matchmakers, snake charmers, and he even bumps into the occasional talking animal or statue. Around the 1550s, there was a boom in the print and publishing industry in China, and this gave rise to a real scramble among publishing bosses for textual material from earlier dynasties to recycle, repackage, and then publish, essentially. The Mugwort collections are a good example of this. So the man who is thought to have written the original collection, Su Shi, or you may have heard him also called Su Zhongpo, was a hugely popular writer, both in his day and indeed centuries later. And the association of Mugwort with him was certainly one reason why we see so many new editions of the original collection, and the two sequels were also a product of this. But this was a very fast-paced, market-driven environment, and trends came and they went again. And just like today, why something is in or not in can be difficult to answer, and certainly no particular flashpoint or something comes to mind as to why the books eventually fell out of fashion. Something I kept thinking about during the translation process was how, as readers, we're so much more conscious of our own reactions, our response, when what we're reading is a joke book of all things. You know, if we don't find it funny, then we are aware of that. And I'd noticed that in translations of humor, historical humor or otherwise, you can often tell when a translator is trying too hard to make it funny to themselves. So something I actively tried not to do was impose my own sense of humor on the work and really let the books speak for themselves, which was something that could be a challenging balance to strike. But I think in the end, our sense of humor is quite an individual, personal thing. Nevertheless, I'm confident that there'll be something for everybody here, since there are a lot of different styles and types of humor represented in the volume. So yeah, I'd encourage readers to have a look and see what they think. I mentioned earlier that the reading experience is like being one of Master Mugwort's disciples. And in a similar way, I suppose as readers, we're on his side. You know, we're laughing with him, not at him. And sure, he's the butt of the joke sometimes, but that's usually good-natured human folly type stuff, rather than anything to do with his ideas or pretensions. Something we do see a lot of is Master Mugwort's personal disdain towards the sophistry and nasty schemes of other characters he runs into. Mugwort's like the sole rational observer of this very bizarre and twisted world that surrounds him and that he keeps getting tangled up in. The title is Misadventures, right? A lot of the satire in the collections has to do with timeless things, humans behaving in a silly way and so on. But the more pointed satire is clearly directed at the times in which the collections were written. So the political and social context of the Song and the Ming, and not really at the Warring States thinkers per se. It just uses this kind of Warring States guise to get its messages across. In fact, using the past to inform or satirize the present is something you bump into very often in classical Chinese literature, and these collections are good examples of that.
Thank you for listening to episode 2 of the Hsu-Tang Library podcast. Join us next time when we take a closer look at another text from the series, an anthology of poetry by Buddhist nuns of late imperial China. You can find out more about the series by following the link in the description.